Hi students, this is meant to be a very basic introduction to LibGuides, just to get you started in creating a guide. I've linked to a number of tutorials, and the SpringShare company has put together extensive information on creating LibGuides. It's important to note first that we're using version 2. You'll find many many tutorials and discussions about how to use version 1. It won't look exactly like the version we're using, so I want to make sure that the tutorials that you do find on the web relate to version 2. Okay, so let's get started. Again, this is going to be a quick and dirty treatment. So one of the things that is the most challenging for folks is to figure out where it is the login is. So I have probably at this point sent you a login email, which will be the way that you get set up, and you can certainly change your password once you've logged in. But imagine that you've already got that together. Down here on the very bottom right, you can see my little hand down here. It says login to LibApps. This is where you're going to get started. So you're going to log in, and I am already logged in, and you can see that I am logged in because and you can also see that I'm in edit mode because this orange bar appears when you are in edit mode. If I were to log out and if I opened our course guides, you'd see that the yellow line isn't there and I cannot edit. So let me log in again, all the way in the bottom, and I'm logging in. And so now I can get myself started. So the first thing you're going to do is create a guide. Now, if you had already created a guide, in this pull-down menu where it says edit an existing guide, you could bring up one of the guides you've been working on. But in this case, my guess is you're going to start your first guide. And so once we click on create a guide, you might fill in some of this information. Starting fresh is the way most people go, but you could start with someone else's LibGuide as a template, in which case you would you'd have that available and you choose it. It may be that somebody's done a similar topic. It may be that there's a design that you admire, or some of the functions in the LibGuide. Then you might want to use that as a template. But let's start fresh for now. And I'm going to call this sample guide. And you could put a description in if you wanted to. You could choose a purpose. I think for general purpose or course guide, it really won't matter all that much. And don't bother assigning it to a group. I may have already done that for you. And the password is optional, so I don't think you should worry about that. And I think that you're probably going to want to share it with the community. So let's just create the guide. Notice, of course, that the orange-yellow line is up there, which really reminds us we're in edit mode. And notice these little tools up here, which we're going to be using. But just notice right now that this is unpublished. We can later change this, and I'm going to insist that you do so the rest of us can see what you've created, and we can make it public, unpublished, published, or private. But right now we're not going to worry about that, and there's a pull down menu. So basically guides are created based on pages and boxes. And if you were using a horizontal arrangement, the pages are really tabs, kind of like a notebook. And we'll start by adding a page. And basically we click this plus sign to add a page. And we decide what kind of page we want. In most cases, you're going to add a regular. If you went into some of the tutorials, you'll see some of the advanced functions, but you could have a discussion or a blog page too. We're going to name it sample page 2. And you could put a description. Note here that pages can either be top level, which are parent pages, I suppose, or sub pages. So the only page we have at this point is the home page. And so I could create a sub page of home. And if I did that, it would appear as a little triangle, kind of a pull down menu. underneath the page that it is a subpage of. But we're not going to worry about that right now. I'm going to call this page 2, I think, and we'll create a page. And as you can see at this point, you'll see that we now have 2 pages. Couple of things to think about. We can give the pages friendly names. Whenever you see a pencil, that means you can do a little editing. And I just got a reminder that I have to give the whole guide a friendly URL before I can give its pages a friendly URL, and that's because this is based on breadcrumbs. So let's go back and do that. And here is the guide URL. I click on that pencil, and I'm going to call it sample guide, unless I've already called something else sample guide. No, that worked. And so in a second or so, you should see that now we have a friendly URL here, which is going to be useful for any users. And so now here, you'll see the breadcrumb sample guide, and then we're going to call that page 2. Of course, you're going to think about clever topics instead of page numbers when you do this yourself. And so you could see how you could create pages that go horizontally along here, and you could also create subpages. And it's important to know that you can change this design and have the pages appear as a left navigation bar rather than as tabs that go horizontally. But that's a choice that you can make later, not for the beginning tutorial. All right, so as I said, this is based on pages, and we'll see how to move those pages around in a bit. And it's also based on boxes. Now, the boxes appear on each page, and what you probably want to do as you set up each page is go to your layout. Now, notice that you can have 1 column, 2 columns, or 3 columns, or 4 columns. And here are the default column widths within 100% of a page, and then you can create custom page widths. Now think about the types of things you're going to include on the page as you make these decisions. And nothing's etched in stone, although sometimes when you change columns, it looks like you've lost content, but that is not true. I'll show you at some point how to retrieve content that you think you might have lost. The default is for a 3-column page with 25, 50, and 25%, but you can certainly change it. I tend to go with 2 columns and 50-50 because I embed a lot of media. If you wanted to, you could create a 1-column page with a beautiful, that might be a title page for a guide. It could be hyperlinked. It could be an interactive poster. And so there's an there are reasons that people create a 1-column guide. But let's go with 50-50 just to think about it. Now, I have purposely not put a banner on your student guides, so you could create a banner of sorts yourself using the top box. Notice that this top box and the bottom box by default span the entire width of the LibGuide. And so if you wanted to create an image in a tool like Canva or PicMonkey or some of the graphic design tools, you could create a beautiful banner, and that would come over here, and it might make your LibGuide look very attractive. But let's take a look at how we might do boxes now that we looked at pages. So you can add a box over here, and I'm going to call this sample box. And what's very nice here is that you can create a variety of different types of boxes. Tabbed boxes actually resemble LibGuides themselves. Galleries are kind of carousels, or the profile box is something you may have noticed that I have on my own LibGuides, which gives my contact information, a little background about me and how to reach me on social media or follow me on social media. And so I'm going to go with the standard box for this intro. You could position the box anywhere you want within a column. In this case, it's top of the column because we have nothing else on here. There's a floating box style that doesn't have borders or titles, and you can have your boxes appear in draft mode so the users can't see them, and they can be invisible. But I'm going to just go with the standard things here. Also, it's important to know that you can reuse an existing box, and that's very handy within a guide or a system of guides, because very often a library catalog or a particular database search, or even Google Books search would be something you want to include across a number of guides. And so rather than recreating the box over and over again, you can reuse an existing box. And if I clicked on this, we don't have any in here, but it would prompt me to choose the guide and then the box. So let's hit save. And this is one of the parts I love. Within your box options, you have the choices of creating so many different types of boxes. So it's important to note that the rich text HTML is probably the most flexible. It's kind of like your wild card. You can put anything in it, and it appears as a WYSIWYG editor. So pretty much I can put anything in here that would put in any kind of word processing or web page design creator. And so I can put a link to CNN by basically typing it and then highlighting it, and then I can put any link in here. I can bring in an image. I don't know what I have in my folder, but I can browse my server, upload a new, I can use any image I've used before or upload a new image. In this case, this is a chat thing I was working on for AASL. I hit OK. I can add text to make it more friendly for special needs. I can adjust the height and width and the alignment here, as you can see. And then when I hit OK, I can actually resize it here. Sorry about that. And then if I wanted to, I can also create a link that if clicking on the image would take me to. So there's a lot of things. I can add a table, I can add special symbols, and I could certainly play with my text alignment and text styles. And here is basically where you can embed any media. So if I wanted to go to YouTube and embed the tutorial I just started working on navigating Canvas, I would get the embed code from YouTube, copy that, go back to the LibGuide, and now that I'm in source, when I paste the code and then hit save or save and close, you can see now that the video is embedded. Hi students, I wanted to give you a few. So we can add another type of box. As you notice, there was a whole long list of box types. I'm going to call this sample box 2, and I'll use standard again. And notice that now I have the option of putting it at the top of the column, after, or at the bottom. And those will become more, you'll have more choices as you have more boxes. So in this case, let's do something else. Let's go back to rich text HTML again, and we'll go into our source. But in this case, I'm going to go to Google Books. And if I get to Google Books and I type something in about Harlem Renaissance, for instance. And in this case, if I see a link here, I can embed that as well. So notice there's embed code here. I can go in here. Maybe this is not the prettiest book to use, but going back to my LibGuide, again, I can embed an ebook that's available in the same way. And then, as you can see, I can navigate this book directly from the box. And I can even search within the book. So let's just add another box now. We'll call this sample box 3. And this time, let's choose a box that will give us, in which we can display RSS feed, an RSS feed. And in this case, let's get something from the New York Times. So the New York Times has a lot of RSS feed options. I am going to, I think we'll go to technology. I opened this. This is the Bits blog. And I noticed that when you have a page that looks like this, it's an RSS feed. And the URL, which you can't see right now, and I'll show you in a second, has the word feed in it. Sometimes you'll see RSS or in the feed. But let's go back to our LibGuide, and we're going to call this and New York Times Bits blog. And I am going to just paste the URL here. It says bits.blog New York Times, and I can choose the number of items I want to display because it's going to refresh on a regular basis. I'm going to say 5. I'd like the description displayed, and there are some other options that you can play with, see how it looks. Now I'm going to hit save, and let's see what it looks like. And so indeed, the RSS feed is here, and it's going to refresh on a regular basis, and users will be able to go there. Some RSS feeds are media rich, and you'd see some very attractive content pop up. In this case, I am not seeing it. There are many other types of boxes you can add, and we don't have time to do all of them in this video. But I just want to mention a couple of things that might be very useful. So if we imagined we were adding sample box number 4, I think we're up to, and we decided what box we were choosing, just know that you could add a poll to see what your users liked or didn't like, or you could create a list of links. Now, you certainly could do that in that WYSIWYG editor, but if you create a list of links, you can scooch the links around very easily, and you would also get some granular data. LibGuides gives great metrics, and the metrics would be down to how many people clicked on any of the links you included in the LibGuide, as long as you included them as links like that. And so you could also use a direct media widget embed. If you were in a library, in a real library, you could embed books from the catalog, and you could use your databases as well. And if you wanted to upload files, PDFs for people to access and download, you could easily do that. It wouldn't be the same as embedding it so that it would be visually there and you could interact with it, but you could absolutely put files up there too. And it's also important to know that you can put Google searches in there, and so that would be handy depending upon different types of users. Some users might want this books or scholar or patent search. Let's just see what it looks like when we put the Google Scholar search there, and you could actually put a default query in there, and so that would actually continually search the query, but let's not do that right now. Let's just see what it looks like with a general Google search. And so here you have the Google Scholar general search there that we haven't added anything to. But it's handy for you to have these on some pages, and I want you to think about the possibilities. So that's just a brief introduction to boxes. This is an example of a profile box, and I would not put this on every page, but notice that you have quick ways to get to me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Google+, and Facebook. You don't need to put all this stuff in there, and in some cases this is too wide, so I might actually have that in in a smaller column. Let's look at layout. Let's actually look at the page area again. Note here that in Pages, this allows me to scooch the order of things just by dragging them. We'd only have 2 pages here, but if I had subpages, I could scooch those around as well. Note also that in the same area, I have the opportunity to move my boxes around. In this case, I have more boxes, and so I could put sample box 2 here, move this here, move them around, and I have an awful lot of flexibility that way. So I'm going to hit save, and you can see that it's going to look a little different from when we just left it. And the Google Scholar search, for instance, is now here on the top of the right column. So that's stuff you can play with. And the other thing other things I want you to notice, because I do not want to keep you here for very much longer. These controls on the top are very, very helpful. But let's take a look. So let's take a look at this area specifically, because I think this is going to be very helpful for you. In terms of guide navigation layout, there is that side nav that I mentioned earlier that you can go with if you like. I'm going to not do that right now. But you could also play with the tab and box options, which give you color and shape options. Now, there is no filter for taste, so I would be a little careful here. In the tab and box options, you can see the tabs are the things along the top or the things that would go down the left nav section. You could have square or round, not a lot of choice here. But here you have the notion of the active background versus the inactive background, and same with your font. So the active background, the active areas are the areas you're actually in. So we're right now in page 2, which is red, and that I've identified that color red for an active background, and I've identified white for my active font, just as I've identified gray for my inactive background and white again for my inactive font. You have a color editor here, and you can absolutely play with it, but what I tend to like to do is go to some design sites for palettes. I'm going to just show you what it looks like, and again, there's no filter for taste. And I'm just going to type in FFF for white here, and then I'm going to go to my inactive background, make it a really ugly pink-ish, purple maybe. This is going to be terribly ugly, and I just want to show you. And I'm going to hit save, and I'm going to cringe probably. There we go. So we got our purple and green. And if we go to box options, similarly over here, we have the options of changing the border width. It's at 1 right now in terms of pixels, I think. And then we have a border color. We have the background for the box, which is this area. We have the header background, which is this area. And we can choose a color for the font. And I am going to revert to default, perhaps, but I actually didn't make any changes. But just know that you really can come up with a color code, a color scheme for this, and you can be very creative. There are examples in our course LibGuide of projects that students have done in the past. And if you go to community.libguides.com, you can kind of shop around for examples of excellent LibGuides, and you can do some searches to find libraries. Here's Springy Picks, and you can see there are some tutorials here, but there are also examples of good designs, cohesive colors. You can get some creative ideas by shopping around in the LibGuides community, which is community.libguides.com. And so this was meant to be just a very basic overview of how to get started in LibGuides. I am happy to meet with you and give you your own private tutorial. And certainly, if you do a little bit of searching for how to do anything in LibGuides version 2, remember, you're going to find an awful lot of support just on the web. I wish you the best, and I'm looking forward to seeing your projects.